Hello, I'm Hayden and welcome to Benevolent Business Podcast. This week we've got Jimmy Pierson on, the UK director of ProVeg.
I really was overwhelmed by the urge to do something about the injustice that I saw. Oh, that's a deep question. That's a good one. I like it. I like questions like this. I find it hard to answer that. I've not heard that before.
I read it and I was like, that's got to be a load of crap. Like, surely. And I've told you, and I'm like, this sounds like complete and utter crap. Like, how is that true?
The most change is going to come from when we get to a situation when...
I think that's the most powerful ending I've ever had to this podcast. ProVeg is a charity. They are funding plant-based meals to get into schools to help children live a healthy, nutritious life on a plant-based diet. Jimmy, thank you for coming on Benevolent Business.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. I've been looking forward to this conversation. So, first, I want to jump straight into ProVeg and how you became part of ProVeg, because you're the UK director, right? But it's global?
That's right,
Completely
yeah.
global.
Yeah, ProVeg UK is one of 10 country branches of ProVeg International, which is very much a global non-profit organisation. And how I got into it, well, I had been working at the Vegan Society as its media and PR person, basically responsible for getting media coverage for the organisation. But my journey to that point had been rather fragmented. I'd started off my career in law, I'd a trainee solicitor and I qualified in a law firm, and then jumped quite quickly into journalism. I was fulfilled a childhood ambition to be a football writer, and I was writing for the Telegraph newspaper, and I was actually covering the World Cup in Brazil in 2014 when I went vegan, and that absolutely changed everything, and decided quite quickly that writing about football wasn't for me anymore, and wanted to work in veganism and do something about what was going on to animals. And so I joined the Vegan Society and working there, and so that was the gateway to working for ProVeg.
So just to pivot back to there, what was the catalyst then so you had this career fixed on writing in football, and then I'm going to be vegan, I'm going to change my career. What was the catalyst that made you go vegan?
Yeah, well, it was inconvenient, I have to admit. I'd reached this point, and I was so delighted with myself to have got there at the Telegraph. And well, the catalyst was my housemate at the time just asked me to go veggie with him for a week.
Okay.
That was it. For no real reason for either of us. He just said, will you join me on this? I just fancy doing it, you know. So I went, okay, yeah, fine. So I did. I went veggie for a week, and it was just a week. But then, you know, in the immediate period after that, I thought, do you know what? I actually quite like this. I enjoyed being veggie for a week. So I started reading a little bit more about it, looking at recipes, and then that led to learning a bit more about the food industry, where our food comes from. And I think it was particularly when I was learning more about the dairy industry and watching videos, and that really struck a chord with me. You know, it really did not feel okay where cow's milk comes from, how it arrives in bottles and how it comes. You know, so I very quickly became vegan. You know, and it was a quick and an easy decision, and it was pretty much overnight, and I got on with it. And for me, it was so noticeable how much better I felt that I thought, this is it. This is the way forward for me anyway. And but what also happened at that time, it made, when I was, sorry, I'll reword that, because I saw the huge injustice that was going on such a global scale. I felt compelled to do something about it, and it made writing about football feel a bit trivial. And I just lost the desire and the appetite to do that anymore. So yeah, completely changed my life, really.
So where does that confidence to make such a career shift? Because that sounds like a very stable, it feels like the trajectory for your career path was there. It was set. It was written out. You could be very successful writing about football. It's a huge industry, and you're literally going to, based on your diet and then what you see around the ethos of veganism, you're like, right, I'm going to flip that, I'm going to get rid of it. Where did you get the confidence to just shift that? Was that a new confidence, or is that something throughout your life you just have been fine taking that risk and just completely changing the status quo of your own lifestyle?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I really was overwhelmed by the urge to do something about the injustice that I saw. So that was sort of out of my control, really. I felt like I had no choice but to do this. This is wrong. I want to be able to do something about it. I feel I felt more passionate about that than anything that I'd felt before. So it was out of my hands. It felt like in many regards,
Yeah.
but I'd made a big shift before. I'd qualified as a solicitor. Well, I'd been in law for quite a while, and I made the leap. I just quit without another job, and I was lucky enough to get into journalism within a couple of months, writing for a national newspaper, and people thought I was a bit silly to leave the law firm without a job, with a vague ambition of being a journalist without any qualifications or experience.
Yeah.
So I'd done that, and that had been successful. You know, so I backed myself to find a job and do some, you know, and be able to have some impact. That's what I wanted. I wanted to do. I wanted to be responsible for bringing out some positive change. I wanted to make an impact.
It's interesting, like, listening to you say that, as you said, like, you've already done it before with going from a law firm and just quitting with no prospects. Just don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something. I've got this vague ambition to be a journalist, so you just quit, which sounds pretty crazy. And if that sounds like a character an individual that would sort of float by going from job to job, never really settling in, never really achieving anything, and yet you've managed to do it in a way. And I just want to try and extrapolate, what is it about Jimmy, what is it about you that found that success in it? Because I'd imagine a lot of people would do similar things and would just kind of, this is not for me anymore, I'm going to quit. Like in my company, I've seen similar things that people just come to me one Tuesday afternoon, gardening's not for me, I'm quitting, you won't see me tomorrow. And I'm like, can't you give me some notice or anything? No, I'm done. But what is it for you that it turned into success, do you think? And it turned into like really finding a passion and hooking. Was it just your brain's wired that way, or?
Oh, that's a deep question. That's a good one. I like it. I like questions like this. I find it hard to answer that. I don't know. I don't know. When I put my mind to something and I want to achieve it, I fancy that I'm going to do it. I don't know. I was lucky at school that I found I didn't find things too difficult without having to try too hard. I've got an ability to remember pages and pages of text on first reading and be able to regurgitate it, and that's a skill that has really helped me be successful in work. So I don't know. It's a tricky question, but I had chopped and changed from job to job. I'd never stayed in a job longer than 2 years until I joined ProVeg, and I've been here for 6 years now.
Is that a case of like not feeling challenged, so to speak? Because if you're saying that you can just retain information into such a high degree, and you're saying like school was quite a breeze, do you think there's an element there of just going from job to job? It's not a case of you are a floaty person that's flaky, it's more a case of, because you are able to retain this, it's more of a case of you're no longer being challenged because you can just pick it up so quickly?
It would feel a bit arrogant to say yes, so I'm not going to say yeah. I also think there's an element of there is a bit of a path that's intended for us, and you're going to change your mind, and you're going to move until you find that path that's intended for you. And I do feel very strongly that I was meant to be doing this, at what I'm doing now, and working to, well, for me it's to help animals, but there are obviously other benefits, huge benefits to everyone, and particularly children, eating less animal products and more plant-based food.
I love that this is going a complete tangent from the questions I've got, but this is really interesting. So one thing I would like, for my own selfish reasons and my own self-discovery of, you've gone from career move to career move, and then you've found something you're passionate about. You said like never settled more than 2 years into a position or a career, whereas now with ProVeg you've been there for much longer, and you're stable, you love it, you're passionate about it. So for me, I've had like all kinds of changes, and now I'm at a point where I feel like I've got a really nice lifestyle that I'm lucky I basically have like a bunch of hobbies. Some, one or two, pay me, others hopefully will in the future. But one thing I find is that I'm kind of, am I trying to dip myself into too many pies, into too many different pools of things, and have I got too many hobbies that they're all a bit diluted? Whereas if I just go, right, this is my one hobby, but then I'm trying to amalgamate them all. So while it's skateboarding, it's podcasting, it's art, I'm linking them all. I'm interviewing people in skateboarding, I'm interviewing people in the art industry, and then with my skating, I'm turning old skateboards into art. So it's all, I suppose the question for me is, for listening to you and hearing you go from thing to thing and then be like, right, I'm settled, what advice would you have to me if I am a bit like, I'm just got so many different hobbies, they seem to take up loads of time, I have this like insecurity of being like, I really need to focus more on this, but I really need to focus more on this, and I kind of want to, I want to be able to have like 3 or 4 of me so that I can give my full-time devotion to each hobby. So I don't want to let go of any. Absolutely love all of them. What would your advice be to me?
I would just carry on doing exactly what you're doing.
Okay,
and
cool.
just and follow what you enjoy the most. And it seems to be what I've noticed is what you enjoy the most is what you're more meant to be doing.
Yeah.
And if you're enjoying them all equally, then that's a tricky one, isn't it? That's
the answer I was looking for. I was hoping you'd say carry on. But back to sort of ProVeg, and one thing that I suppose shocked me in a way that I was really impressed with was just with Cambridgeshire Council and hearing their response to it. And so with what did I see, like you featuring on the news and such, and there was a whole thing of uproar with local farmers and talking about council meetings are going to be serving plant-based meals, which for the 7-8 meetings a year they have. And obviously there's that challenge and argument with local farmers. But what is it within this council, Cambridgeshire Council, that has made them so pro plant-based?
Well, it's Oxfordshire Council.
Oxfordshire.
Yeah.
I've written Oxfordshire and I'm like, we're in Cambridgeshire, and I keep getting it's just like...
No, it's okay. To be perfectly honest, when for these couple of councils that are taking these steps to become more plant-based, not just on the school side, but particularly making their events more plant-based, it's dependent on a couple of councillors, elected councillors, who are passionate about this and are really driving that forward, supported by other organisations, including ProVeg UK. And they're just trying to build support amongst the other councillors and putting motions forward and seeing the vote and getting them voted on and getting them passed. And that's what's happened. There's one in particular at Oxfordshire that's driven this, and it's got broad support across the council. So yeah, we are seeing a few more councils that are taking these steps like that, but in reality, they are they're symbolic of a shift in direction, and they really should be supported. But the actual impact of that, a handful of events a year being mostly plant-based, isn't very much. It's more the publicity that goes with it, the statement of intent that, look, here's a council that's going to do things differently because they care about sustainability in the planet and they care about people eating healthier. So it's to be applauded, but with the caveat that it's not going to make that much difference in terms of the actual numbers. But that's where I feel like ProVeg UK comes in, because when we're changing school meals, it is much bigger numbers. And we're able to influence one person and it changes the menus in hundreds of schools, eaten by thousands of children every day. And that's millions of meals that are swapped that would have been meat-based that become meat-free or plant-based. So those two things together, the big numbers from when we're working with schools through local authorities, and when local authorities make these very public kind of statements that we're going to be more plant-based, I think they're great. But
yeah, I can see what you mean. Like, as you say, it's only a handful of meetings with a handful of people, but it's that PR side of things.
It is.
On the news of like, we're going to be plant-based. That's a huge story.
Exactly. And Jeremy Clarkson comes down and is interviewed, and he's absolute caricature, and because he was interviewed on the news directly before I was, and he was saying he's ridiculous. Come on, meat should be served. It's ludicrous that these meals are going to be these days are going to be plant-based. I'm not sure he even believes that. We were chatting to him, and he was just felt like a charade, a bit of a joke, really, for him. But he he would probably disagree. But the fact that he was there raises the profile of it all, gets people talking about it. Other councils go, actually, not a bad. They've laid down a bit of a marker here. Maybe we can follow suit.
So within schools, I'm trying to think like back to when, I was in school like 10, 15 years ago, so a very different time. But I'm trying to think if a program came into my school and it was talking about veganism and a plant-based meal, and even if it was a free option or whatever it was, I feel like the response from a lot of students would be like, rabbit food. Why do I want rabbit food? Like, no, give me some meat. Although, to be fair, school meals weren't exactly serving you a sirloin steak, but I feel like I'm curious what the attitude has been like and what the uptake has been like for students. Is it quite a push to educate, or is it something that's been adopted quite easily nowadays?
Yeah, well, we are quite subtle in our interventions in schools. We want them to be successful, want them to be long lasting. So when we work with a local authority caterer that's catering for hundreds of schools, for instance, and we act like their menu consultants. They give us their menus, we get our red pens out, give them some, change the language of some of the dishes to make the plant-based ones seem more attractive. We don't call them vegan or vegetarian or meat-free. We give them a name that's descriptive and describes the taste and texture and provenance where it comes from. So we play around with the language, we play around with the positioning, because research says that the item that's listed on the top of the menu will be chosen far more than the one underneath it. And usually on a school menu we see the meat-based dish on the top and the vegetarian option underneath, which...
Or on the other side of the page.
But sometimes it comes across as inferior or niche, or not an option for the meat, the normal everyday kid who's eating meat at school. It's like they're not allowed it. So we play around with positioning as well as the language, and we present it as a more attractive option, more desirable one. And we see uptake increase significantly, not even by changing any of the food, just by rebalancing these menus that have been weighted so long in favour of the meat dishes. And this is all backed by research, all the work we do, and this is the aspect of the work that I absolutely love. I'll give you an example of some research. So Sainsbury's cafes, they had a meat-free sausage and mash in its cafe, right? And as an experiment, they changed the name. Dish exactly the same, but they changed the name to a Cumberland spiced veggie sausages and mash, and it increased uptake by 76%.
So just changed it from veggie sausage and mash to Cumberland spice.
So from meat-free sausages and mash to Cumberland spiced. Getting rid of the meat-free, because that feels like something's missing, doesn't it? Meat-free. It's quite a negative, restrictive language. And another one, a university in the States changed the name of its carrots to X-ray vision carrots to be more attractive to kids. Increased uptake by 50%. And so it's these kind of research studies that we implement in schools. And, so often you'll see this on a normal menu. You'll see a meat-based dish described beautifully. Like, you might see a Sri Lankan aromatic chicken masala. Right? And the veggie version of the same dish might just be veg curry. Just an afterthought. Other than the vegan and vegetarian kids, who's going to choose that? Literally none. So we make it a fairer fight. We restore some parity. So the veggie dish, the vegan one, whatever you want to call it, is described in the same way. It's given the same care and love and attention.
That's very clever.
Yeah, well, it's not our research. We're just applying it, and it works. And it means that when we partner with a local authority, it's the first step, the first stage. They don't have to change all the menus, the actual dishes and the recipes. Just play around with the menu, and then let's have a look how that goes, how uptake increases, and then we'll introduce some more plant-based dishes. We'll introduce a new meat-free day, which, because we don't like that term meat-free, because it implies something negative. We theme the day around the planet, around climate change, Save the Planet Day. And because our interventions are a bit more subtle, it's soft and gentle, it's nudging, we don't get pushback from parents. Occasionally, but not very often, and certainly not from the children. The feedback we get from our new recipes in particular has been amazing. It's blown us away, really. We've developed the UK's first recipe book, plant-based recipe book for primary schools. So there's 35 recipes in there, and they are well and truly taste tested by primary school kids, and they love it. And they're cheaper, healthier, more sustainable. Yeah, something we're very proud of.
It's interesting. When I had the conversation with Michelle yesterday at the Tipsy Vegan, she echoed the same kind of ethos as yours saying there, with like your entry into schools and that subtlety around it. And like with the Tipsy Vegan, they want to do that same thing of, it's not about being vegan this, vegan that, and everything's plant-based. It's about how can you create a menu and create an atmosphere that just attracts people. Vegans are going to love it and they're going to tell their friends and bring them along, but as a meat eater you don't feel like you're missing out and you're having to neglect what you like. It's just a case of come here, have some great food, great drinks, great experience, and then afterwards you might go, oh, it's vegan, didn't realise that. It's actually really good.
Exactly. Yeah, I endorse that approach entirely. Because what we don't just want to cater for vegans in schools, absolutely not. We want it. all children, regardless of what they usually eat, to more often choose these healthier, more sustainable meals, because we've got an opportunity here to influence dietary habits of children for years to come. This next generation, and at the moment, most UK children are fibre deficient. Only, a third of children aged 5 to 10 eat only one portion of vegetables a day.
Wow.
And by year 6, 34% of children are either overweight or obese. And in reception, it's quite a high number as well. I can't quite, off the top of my head, I can't remember what it is. But you've got child obesity, absolute crisis in this country. And here's an opportunity for them to eat healthier, more sustainable food that they can really enjoy.
Definitely. And it's something like, just in my own experience of like with my own like friends and such, just hearing their attitudes towards it, and it is very much a like, oh, that shitty rabbit food.
Yeah.
And like that whole thing of subtlety, I've just got this idea in my head of like, once I've got my own place and everything, I want to just do this huge barbecue, and people come round to it, and I don't say anything about what's up for grabs or whatnot. It's just come to the barbecue, there's gonna be drinks, there's gonna be food, and create this whole feast, and people just get tucked in and eat what they want. But then obviously there'll be vegans, and I'm like, yeah, it's all vegan. But just don't tell anyone. And hopefully the response to everyone will be like, man, this is some good food, I absolutely loved it, it's been incredible. What is all this stuff? And I'm like, it's all vegan.
Just tell them at the end.
Yeah.
That would be great. I've never done that. I would love to see that. Yeah, that's a good plan. So what you have on Beyond Burgers and things like that.
Yeah. Just create this whole array of everything, and I think hopefully people will just stuff their face and just kind of at the end of it be like, oh mate, that was divine. Yeah. And you're like, oh, so you do like veggie food then?
Yeah, please do that.
Yeah. I've got quite a few friends that are very, very devoted and committed, much as I was. Like literally, my girlfriend was vegan my girlfriend was veggie when we met, and I was a very big meat eater. Like anytime I went out to a restaurant, it was the mixed grill. Where's the mixed grill? Where's the carnival's dinner? And I would say to her, like, I'm going to get you eating meat again. I'm going to get you eating meat again, and then flip it around a year later, and I'm like, I'm going to make us both vegan. We're going to be vegan.
Well, I was very much like you actually. I grew up in a household with my mum and my two sisters, and my mum wanted us to eat healthily, but it was definitely not vegetarian or vegan. And I was very much a meat eater, and whenever we went out for a meal, it was steak and ale pie, steak and kidney pie, without even looking at the menu. I knew what I was having. A bit like you with your mixed grill. And we used to go to my auntie and uncle's for Christmas, and they were vegetarian. So on Christmas Day we'd be there, and I used to kick up a right stink, kick up a fuss, like asking my mum, can you just bring me a portion of turkey on Christmas Day? I was that petulant kid. Looking back, I can't quite believe that.
Hope you're enjoying the conversation. I'm just interrupting we don't have any official sponsors on the podcast, so I'm going to use this opportunity to shout about some benevolent businesses that I see in the world, that I use myself personally, that I want to encourage you to try out and just get the best out of what businesses have to offer. So I'm going to be shouting about Huel. I became a Hueligan a few months ago, and it was actually because they sponsored Diary of a CEO podcast with Stephen Bartlett, and Stephen Bartlett was always screaming about it and talking about it. So yes, of course there's huge benefits. I tried it out purely based on the idea that as I'm trying to become more and more plant-based, and I'm vegetarian but I'm trying to be more vegan, Huel is a great way for me to kind of increase that, as it's completely plant-based, it's vegan. I don't use it as a meal supplement, but I do use it as a way to just get more protein and more vitamins and minerals into my diet on a daily basis. Before I talk to you about the biggest benefit, I'll mention some of the downsides. Really is, I started by trying the ready-to-drink Huels, and I have to be honest, they are disgusting. They taste far. Anyone that can say they taste nice, I just can't agree with. Don't understand how you can enjoy the taste of it. Something must be wrong with your taste buds. But I kept trying, and in the end I bought the bags where you mix it yourself. I got the black edition with the extra protein. Those I do get along with a lot better, but do be prepared with that. It is something that the taste isn't there, but the health benefits are definitely there when you actually go through the ingredients and what it's full of. It is incredible what they can fit into one drink, being 400 calories, despite the fact it's 40 grams of protein. It's got 26 vitamins and minerals in it. And the biggest benefit I've seen is my hobby skateboarding. Straight away I found if I drank a Huel, I was suffering a lot with like fatigue, so I would go skate, come home, and the next day like my thighs would be aching, legs are aching all over just from like wearing myself out. Yet I found if I drank a Huel, because of all the nutrients I'm getting and the extra protein of course, my legs were fine. My recovery time went from like a day or two to 0. I didn't need any recovery time. I could go skate day after day, and in fact I'm in Jamaica right now on a 6-week trip volunteering. I've had brought Huel with me, which again helps out massively. It's just a way for me to boost the nutrients I'm getting on a day-to-day basis. And I literally have run out the last few days, and I've noticed my legs are aching where I'm trying to skate, but because I'm not getting my Huel each day, I'm aching. So I can't wait to get home, get a fresh batch. So check it out for yourself, let me know what you think, if you like it, if you don't. And of course, the other thing I will mention is I did talk about the taste and not liking it so much. However, you can mix it up, create all kinds of different shakes and whatnot. People have done some incredible things, so check them out on Instagram. You'll get all kinds of inspiration there. Back to the podcast. How do you find so for me personally, I'm very stubborn and very much like fixed in my ways, and I call it obsessive. My therapist or like coach, she likes to call it curious and confident, but I'm very obsessive. So like if I get into something, I am very passionate, deeply engrossed within it. And so obviously going over to veggie, learning more and more about the whole industry around meat, and especially the impact of the climate and on your own health, that's, as soon as I start to learn about it, I'm just like, find it like frustrating that people aren't aware of it, or even if people are aware of it, well, why aren't they just like in the same shock I am? And so I'm just trying not to be like, stop eating carcasses, but like I do find it quite frustrating. But then when you see a lot of the propaganda, especially so like the Oxfordshire, that whole news article and the local farmers talking about, they're saying, literally there was a quote there of one of the farmers saying like, they're saying eat this avocado from Brazil that's been shipped across the world, but our local produce from down the road, that hurts the environment. Yeah. And it's like, well, actually it does. Despite the fact that avocado has come halfway around the world, the carbon impact is nothing compared to that carcass you've produced.
Yeah.
So like for me, that emotional management of the propaganda and like getting frustrated about it, I just wonder, how do you find it quite infuriating, frustrating? What's your kind of emotional connection, attachment to it?
Yeah, I felt like that for maybe 6 months after I made that decision to go vegan, and I was sort of speaking to all my friends, ranting a bit about it, about the injustice. Like, have you seen what's going on? It's absolutely crazy. And that was met with a brick wall, really. So I just gave up on that, and I just quite quickly realised that that wasn't being angry or highly emotional was not the way that was going to be successful at work, and it definitely wasn't going to be successful in social circles.
Yeah.
So I just accept where people are. It's all about acceptance, I think, and I know people who have more recently gone, I'm quite interested in veganism now and eating a bit less meat, and get in touch. And I don't think that maybe would have been possible had I continued to just be a bit of a ranter. So that was 6 months out of 6 years. So I think that was, as a ratio, I think that's probably okay. But yeah. I do understand how other vegans can't get out of that, what I was in for 6 months.
Yeah.
Because it is so huge. And the injustice is so great, and the treatment of animals is so appalling, and it's just continuing to be brushed under the carpet in many ways at policy level and en masse across the world. So I do get it, but the founders of ProVeg International are two very they're not only are they effective altruists, they want to do the most good, but they're very I suppose the pioneers in communication on veganism, and I've learnt a lot from them about ways to communicate on this, and I've also done a few media interviews on TV, and I felt that the best way is to be calm, rational, understanding, not argumentative, and I think that's the way forward.
Just kind of like general communication skills, but it's hard when it's so emotional.
It's tough. It is really tough, and I feel it, and it's definitely for animals why I'm doing this, even though we never really, when we're working with schools and local authorities, we never talk about animals. It's not a driver that's going to land with them or resonate with any of the people that we work with, so we just leave it off. But it's the main driver for me, for sure.
Yeah, it's because like my girlfriend and I, we used to go for like brunches and stuff in London with a couple of friends, and so they would eat meat, or still do, but so there's I don't know if you've been to Unity Bar.
No, I've heard of it.
It's good. It's a good restaurant. So obviously whole vegan menu, but they just do. You go in there, you order calamari, a bacon cheeseburger, but obviously all plant based. So like our approach to that, it's just we were really excited to go there and thought, oh, we'll go there for dinner.
Yeah.
And so again, like the whole communication thing, rather than being like, right, let's actually go to somewhere ethical or trying to make an argument around it, it's just like, this restaurant looks amazing, we want to go, should we like incorporate it into our next day out, whatever. So they're jumping on it. So like for their experience, they go in there and have fish and chips, calamari, whatever it is, and they're just thinking, damn, this is good.
Yeah.
And so it's that subtle way of introducing it. But I find, like, when I was a meat eater and just people's attitudes around veganism, it was kind of much, oh, those preachy vegans, and they're always so preachy. But then as I've been veggie, I've kind of found it the other way round. I find meat eaters are much more preachy. So in a room of those that do eat meat and don't, you will find the meat eaters will be like, why are you veggie? Why are you vegan? Whereas the vegans and veggies don't really seem to be like, why are you meat? That's just the experience I've found firsthand. Yeah. But then if it's socially acceptable and it's obvious that the question is going to be asked, why are you vegan and what's with this plant, what's with this rabbit food? Whereas it doesn't feel socially acceptable to say, why are you eating that animal?
Yeah.
And it, as soon as, because I tried this on my mum of just like, why do you eat meat? And every time I kind of bring it up, it's, look, if you try and get that preachy again, I'm going to stop buying the veggie food for you. I'm like, I'm not, I'm just curious. Like, genuinely answer the question, why do you eat meat? Oh, well, because my parents did, their parents did, everyone just kind of has, and that's why. And I found that quite interesting, and this, I forgot what I was going with my thought on this now.
Well, I'll just chip in. The answer to the question, why do you eat meat, whatever they say, the answer is that it's been so ingrained in society that it's normal, it's necessary, and that it's nice.
Yeah.
You know, and it's that hidden ideology that's so ingrained in society. And Melanie Joy coined that term carnism, that hidden ideology that is ingrained in society that makes people eat meat. So it's not anyone's fault. It's carnism. It's this. That's the driving force. And also this understanding or misunderstanding that it's also nutritious. You know, there might be some health benefits, but there's a lot of negative health consequences from eating meat. So whatever they say there, that's the reason it's carnism.
I think as well, it's just this paradigm shift in the way people think about food and the conscientiousness around it. And it's a very similar, I find it very similar. So I have an electric van, and
Great.
Just my friend's attitude again towards that is very similar to the idea of me abstaining from meat. Is just that, oh, it's rabbit food, and then, oh, your electric van, oh, we'll have to give you 2 days notice, we're going to hang out so you can charge and plug it in. Constantly, like, the jokes around it of just like, oh, we'll go, like, so obviously I'm a skateboarder and we're always talking about where we're going to go. Oh, well, we can't go too far, you won't be able to make it, or if we're there, we won't be able to get home, so should we have to give you a tow or something? I'm like, I've literally taken the thing to Cornwall and back again, like, it's very easy. But yeah, it's a very similar attitude. It's quite this paradigm shift within society, and it's seeing, although I feel like it's probably just a thing of, because I'm involved in it, I'm now paying attention to it, but it does feel like it's much more of this growing change in attitudes, which is all for the good.
Definitely.
But so on that, do you see a future, like you've talked there about Oxfordshire Council and more councils, do you see a future where it is recognised and world leaders, governments, like the little secrets hidden within the government of just like what's going on there? Like, do you know about the cheese warehouses?
Go on.
So I got this from Ed Winner's book, Vegan Propaganda. So government has, so this came from, I hope I don't mess up the exact information, but to paraphrase, if you want the actual information, read the book. But from back in the war, there was this incentive to get milk out for rations, and so there was this huge push for the dairy industry. And then as the war came to an end, there wasn't such this push for dairy. And so in order to help the dairy industry so they wouldn't see a loss in sales and such, they created this propaganda, this incentive into schools of like, drink your milk for your calcium and such. And that helped boost the dairy industry and keep it going. And the government made an agreement with the dairy industry that there would be a minimum price set on their produce so that they could sustain and be profitable, and any excess that they didn't sell, the government would buy off of them in order to keep that industry going, which seems bizarre. But they didn't put any limitations. So obviously the dairy industry boomed, And so they were guaranteed to sell. Why wouldn't you just work 24/7,
Yeah.
get as many cows as you can, pump them full of all kinds of antibiotics, steroids and whatnot, get them pregnant as much as possible, get those calves out, get them pumping milk and all sorts, making cheese. So, because the government's just going to buy whatever you can't sell. And so the government did. But as a result, they've got all of this produce. So now they have warehouses full of cheese and milk and such and dairy products because they've just bought so much. What do? We'll just store it. So there are now warehouses stored. And you think you hear that, and yet there's 8 billion people, or what percentage of people, I don't know the stat, but what percentage of people are going hungry, are starving, and yet there is literally an industry that is just the antithesis of waste.
Yeah, it is utterly extraordinary. Like, it's not surprising in any way. It doesn't surprise me that, I've not heard that before, but I
read it and I was like, that's got to be a load of crap. Like, surely. And I've told you, and I'm like, this sounds like complete and utter crap. Like, how is that true?
And it at some point in time in the future, that will be looked back on. You'd imagine as a scandal, as a disgrace, really. But no, it doesn't surprise me. And in terms of government policy or government approach to meat reduction and plant-based, it's not a good situation at the moment. You've got, I'm just talking about the UK government at the moment, like it's independent climate change advisor, its official advisor on climate change last year recommended that we reduce all meat and dairy by 20%, rising to 35% by 2050. They said we need that if we've got any chance of reaching net zero. That's got to happen. And then the National Food Strategy, another independent report by Henry Dimbleby, founder of Leon, who we ProVeg UK were fortunate enough to be an official consultant on that, recommended that, called for the nation to eat 30% less meat by 2032, and eat what was the other bit? 20% more fruit and veg, 50% more fibre. So all the experts are saying we need to eat less meat and dairy. Everyone knows that really now. That's widely accepted. That's a given. Yet this UK government just won't go near it. It's so afraid of being seen as a nanny state and telling people what they can and can't eat. So they don't want to be seen as a nanny state. Added to the fact that the meat and dairy industry is so powerful, and it's so connected in with government that time and again I've seen examples of reports that are about to be published, and at the last minute something about plant-based is removed at the last minute, and full well that's the the meat and dairy flexing its muscles, and it's too powerful as a lobbying body for government policy to do anything meaningful about meat reduction. I don't know what the next government's going to do, or the government after that in the UK, but I'm not optimistic. I really feel that the most change is going to come from when we get to a situation when plant-based alternatives are on parity with meat products on taste, texture and price. And when we get to that point, with all the other arguments on the health, sustainable, animal welfare benefits, that we can see reach that tipping point, and we can see a much greater shift towards people eating more plant-based. Maybe when cultured alternatives, actually when cellular agriculture brings out, its products properly and they're on the market in supermarkets at the same price, is that going to tip the balance? I don't know yet. Probably part of the puzzle. So I do think it's going to be driven by industry and consumers rather than government policy. And on an EU level, ProVeg International do lots of work, but it's normally firefighting against advancements of meat and dairy, who have tried to ban meaty terms for plant-based products. It was put forward and voted on at an EU level to ban terms like burger and sausage from plant-based products using it. So, comically that would have led possibly to veggie burgers being called veggie discs and veggie sausages being called veggie tubes. Anyway, ProVeg were involved in overturning that, so that is not going to happen. And there was also a plant-based dairy censorship proposed, and these are all driven by the meat and dairy industry. There's no doubt about that. So I'm not optimistic on a policy level, far from it. But our work at ProVeg International is crucial, along with the work of other organisations. But
I definitely agree with you.
Not
there.
a positive, not a positive state of mind, but I think it's the way it is. I think it's truthful.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think it's going to come from industry and individuals, and it's a similar to like the challenges in the transition to renewable energy, and as well like the reduction and hopefully the like eradication of just single-use plastics and such. And it's not going to be coming from like companies like Coca-Cola and such. No offense, Coca-Cola, but it's not going to be coming from them and actually they're not going to decide to go, do you know what, we're going to eradicate plastic, we're going to go back to glass and aluminium purely. It's going to happen by individuals making that decision to go, do you know what, there's a drink there that's plastic, there's a drink there that's in an aluminium can, I'm going to go that, I'm going to abstain from that. Yeah. But if everybody decided to do that, because like price parity is there with that kind of thing, but obviously we're getting there with like electric vehicles, that kind of thing, and sustainable energy. But it's, as you said, if the vegan industry can do the same thing, well, I'd say now when you go into a restaurant, if you're going to get the like a burger that's plant-based compared to a meat one, it's generally the same price. I've even seen like veggie alternatives be cheaper. But I think then if it can come from individuals to make that decision based on if enough information, I think that's where there's that huge benefit to social as well. There's a lot of arguments whether it's a good or a bad force in our world, but having the ability for people to share their stories and grow such a huge vast platform, like that's the reason I became aware of the situation, especially around all these things, plastics, renewables, plant-based alternatives. It's all because of what I've learned from other people sharing their information on YouTube, on Instagram, and just paying attention and just being flooded with that information and going, well, actually I'm going to start listening, and then making those choices. And I think that's where, because it's easy to say it, but the dairy industry, the meat industry will collapse if society, there's 60 plus million people in the UK, if 55 million people go, do you know what, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. That's it. The dairy industry, the meat industry, or if they decide they're going to be plant-based, those industries will just collapse within a month. But it's just 55 million people making that decision. But I think that is actually easier to achieve than the dairy industry, the meat industry going, do you know what, we're wrong, we're going to completely change.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, there should be government interventions to help producers, manufacturers, farmers transition to more sustainable methods. I'm not talking about more sustainable meat and dairy, I'm talking about helping them financially to transition to plant-based protein, alternative protein. I do care about, I think most vegans would care about the livelihoods of human beings. It's just they need some financial support and to transition. And I know that the landscape of the UK doesn't lends itself to different types of farming, and sometimes it's not suitable for plant-based crops. But that needs to start. That transition needs to start.
Well, the irony is, you talk about that funding. The meat industry is profitable because of subsidies.
Okay,
so
exactly.
Again, like, don't take my exact figures on this because I can't remember the exact, but I'm pretty sure it's over 90% of profits in the meat industry come from subsidies, government subsidies. It's like, it's a system that doesn't work. It's literally broken as it is. It doesn't make money.
It is being propped up.
Yeah.
And it has been propped up for a long time.
But I feel like I could talk with you about this all day long, but I'm cautious of your time, and this has been a wonderful conversation, but I do have a closing tradition on this podcast. Okay. And it was a question, it's now two questions. So my penultimate question to you, Jimmy, is what is one thing, I feel like I know what the answer is going to be, but be creative as you want. What is one thing that exists within the world today that you hope one day will be eradicated?
Yeah. One thing that exists in this world that I hope to be eradicated, well, the obvious answer is animal agriculture, isn't it? But I'll say that unless I think of something else, because it is, it's abhorrent, needs to go.
That was a very similar answer to what Michelle said yesterday, and I figured if I'm going to have vegan businesses on the podcast, that's pretty much what the answer is going to be. But the more people say it, I suppose the more people will be aware.
Yeah, I'm going with it.
My ultimate question to you, the final question, is obviously this being Benevolent Business, and it's hopefully me sharing some positivity through podcasting. What is one piece of benevolent news that you would like to share with us, whether it's something within your own work, your own business, whether it's something you saw on the news, something you read in the book, or a stat that you live? Michelle shared a wonderful piece of information, or like this life ethos she lives her life by, which is quite interesting.
Yeah. Oh, that's well.
So
I'll look forward to hearing that. Such a good question. I wish I'd known about it earlier. I should have listened to more of your podcasts before I joined.
Michelle's was
that one.
Michelle. She said her positive thing to share was that she lives her life reminding herself that she's, so like when facing difficult times and challenges and you really feel like you're in a hole untrapped, you've survived 100% of the struggles you've experienced in life. So your success rate is 100%.
Yeah.
So I thought that's actually pretty good.
Yeah, that is good, yeah. I always think that I'm always in the right place at the right time for whatever my journey's meant to be.
Even when it feels like it's going wrong?
Yeah. Leads you to where you're meant to be going. So I always feel that, and that is reassuring, that I'm always where I'm meant to be.
What do you think, what's telling you that, it's like listening to you, it sounds like you have this belief that we have a destiny. Is that right?
To a certain extent.
Yeah. Well, what makes you feel that?
Oh, it's an inner knowing, really, rather than something that's in my head. I do feel that we, far too many of us are in our heads and not in our hearts. And when you make decisions from this place in here, they're the right decisions. Yeah, think less, feel more.
Oh, I think that's the most powerful ending I've ever had to this podcast. Thank you so much. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks, Hayden. Yeah, pleasure. Enjoyed it.